My name is Carol Dalton, and I was 28 years old when everything in my life quietly came undone. Not dramatically, not with shouting, or plates shattering, or tears soaking the carpet. No, my story ended the way so many real stories do, with the soft, steady unraveling of someone you once believed would stand beside you forever. I wasn't anyone extraordinary. I was a software developer in a mid-sized city tucked into a job that paid well enough for nice dinners and weekend getaways, but not enough for anything extravagant. I liked routine. I liked stability. I liked knowing what tomorrow looked like. It was probably the first thing that drew Benjamin Rivers to me: stability, something he'd never known how to hold, even when he claimed he wanted it. We met 3 years earlier at a friend's barbecue in late spring, the kind of event where mismatched chairs were scattered across a lawn, and everyone brought a dish they hoped someone besides themselves would eat. Benjamin was 26, then a graphic designer with a smile that could soften even the most defensive edges. He had this blend of charm and artistic chaos that made him feel like possibility embodied. I fell faster than I should have. He was healing from a brutal breakup with Chloe Hart, a musician whose life spun like a carousel with no breaks, obsessive passion disappearing. Acts reckless spending, emotional whiplash. He'd told me how she cheated on him repeatedly, how she'd scream and then cry and then beg and then vanish. It should have been a warning sign. Back then, I interpreted it as vulnerability. I was the rebound who stayed, the stable one, the safe one, the dependable one, the one who helped him pick himself back up. When his freelance income dried up, I covered his half of the rent without hesitation. Whenever he doubted his talents, I'd tell him he was better than the clients who ghosted him. I believed in him in a way he'd never been believed in before, and I wore that like a badge of honor. And Benjamin knew how to make that devotion feel meaningful. I remember one night in particular, he lay on the couch with his head in my lap, tracing circles on my knee as he whispered, "You're nothing like Chloe Carroll. You're consistent. You're good for me." It felt like a compliment then. Now looking back, it stings like being unknowingly drafted into a comparison game I never agreed to play. We moved in together after a year. My apartment had this warm sunlight that hit the kitchen counter every morning, and Benjamin used to say it made everything feel hopeful. I adjusted my life around him, turned down a remote job offer with cross-country travel because he hated being alone, cooked dinners after long workdays, made sure the apartment felt calm and welcoming. I thought we were building something solid. But around 6 months before everything fell apart, things shifted, subtly at first, almost invisibly. Benjamin's phone started lighting up more often. He'd tilt the screen slightly away from me when he typed. I'd catch small private smiles that vanished the moment I entered the room. At first, I didn't assume the worst. I assumed he'd made a new friend or reconnected with someone harmless. I was wrong. One evening, while we were eating dinner, roasted vegetables, pasta, and a bottle of cheap but decent red wine, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, smiled, then quickly flipped it face down. I asked, "Who's that?" "Just Chloe," he said casually, as if dropping the name of the ex who'd nearly destroyed him was normal conversation now. She needed graphic advice. It's nothing. Nothing. The very word people weaponize when they want to avoid scrutiny. I tried to let it go. I tried to be the understanding girlfriend, but nothing escalated into something quickly. A ping during breakfast. A muted laugh at her meme while we watched TV. Longer replies typed a little too thoughtfully. A defensive shrug whenever I asked simple questions. It wasn't the text that hurt. It was the way he shifted, the familiarity, the warmth that used to be reserved for me seeping out through the cracks. The night I finally said something, I did it gently, calmly, because calmness had always been my armor. "Benjamin, I'm not comfortable with how much you're talking to Chloe. It feels like more than just casual messages." He looked at me with a mixture of irritation and disbelief like I'd just accused him of a crime. "Carol, seriously, it's just talking. We have history, okay? Not everything needs to be a big insecurity thing." The word insecurity hit me like a push to the chest. I wasn't someone who cried jealousy at shadows. I wasn't someone who dug through phones or demanded explanations. I believed in boundaries, not control. But Benjamin framed my concern like an emotional flaw. I backed off because I didn't want to feed the narrative he was building in his head. But at night, when he fell asleep with his phone tucked under his pillow, I would stare up at the ceiling and replay every moment we'd shared, our road trips, our laughter, the time he said I made him feel safe. and it all felt strangely distant, like a story someone else had lived. He became more secretive, more dismissive. His conversations with Chloe grew from occasional texts to an everyday routine. He talked about her music projects at dinner, about her emotional struggles, about how she got him creatively in ways others didn't. It was slow, emotional abandonment disguised as nostalgia. One Friday evening, the dam finally burst. I asked him, "Why are you hiding your phone lately?" He didn't answer my question. Instead, he snapped, "If you can't handle me talking to my ex, that's your problem." Then he grabbed his jacket and said he was going to Chloe's place to talk. Just talk. The same phrase that once comforted me now made my blood feel cold. The apartment door shut behind him. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, suffocating. I sat there for a while, staring at the empty seat across from me, feeling something settle in my chest. Not despair, not anger, but clarity. I finally saw the pattern I'd been trying so hard to ignore. He wasn't texting her because he needed closure. He was texting her because he wanted the chaos again, because he missed being someone else in someone else's broken story. He'd made his choice, and now it was my turn. While he was at Chloe's place talking, I stood up, walked to our bedroom, and began methodically packing his belongings. Not frantically, not emotionally, just with quiet precision. Shirts folded, books stacked, art supplies arranged neatly, sketch pads he filled when he still loved me. 14 boxes by the time I was done. 14 boxes representing 3 years of hope effort and the simple, devastating truth. Some problems really can be solved, just not the way you expected. The silence after I sealed the last box felt strangely peaceful. Not triumphant, not vengeful, just quiet. For the first time in months, the apartment didn't feel tense. It felt like it was exhaling with me, releasing a breath neither of us knew we'd been holding. I stacked all 14 boxes neatly in the hallway outside the front door. His clothes, his books, his small collection of watercolor brushes he swore he'd use more often, even the vintage camera I'd gifted him on his birthday. I placed a single note on top of the highest box written in the same calm tone I wished he had shown me in the end. Problem solved. Then I changed the locks, washed my hands with lavender soap until the scent overwhelmed my thoughts, grabbed my bag, and headed to my friend Erin's apartment across town. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't replay the breakup line in my head. My emotions felt folded like laundry packed too tightly in a drawer. Erin lived in a small but warm place, plants on every windowsill, soft lights glowing from mismatched lamps, the faint smell of cinnamon drifting from her essential oil diffuser. When she opened the door, she took one look at me and didn't ask a single question. She just said, "Wine or tea?" "Tea," I replied, surprising myself. We sat on her couch while the water boiled, neither of us saying much. The quiet wasn't awkward. It was comforting, a soft blanket wrapped around a wound I wasn't ready to look at. Erin eventually set a mug in front of me and squeezed my hand. "You don't have to explain anything tonight." I nodded. I didn't want to explain. I felt like if I started talking, something inside me might shatter. That night, I slept on her pull-out couch, scratchy blanket, 2 firm pillow springs poking my back. But it was the best sleep I'd had in months. No Benjamin's late-night typing, no glow of his screen, no tension humming beneath the surface. The next morning, I woke to 10 missed calls and a flood of texts from him. "Carol, what is this? My stuff is in boxes. Are you serious right now? Open the door. This is overreacting. We need to talk. Carol, answer me. This is insane." They weren't apologies. They weren't even questions. They were demands. Benjamin had always been good at rewriting a situation so he could play the part he preferred in the moment. Confused victim, passionate artist, misunderstood boyfriend, whatever, earned him sympathy. I didn't respond. I didn't even open the messages fully. I just saw enough from the notification previews. Around noon, his tone shifted. Another string of messages buzzed through. "I didn't cheat. It wasn't like that. You're making this bigger than it is. Please answer me. Carol, seriously, talk to me." Still nothing resembling accountability. By early evening, his frustration turned into anger. "Wow, really? You're childish. You threw away 3 years. Unbelievable." Not a single moment of self-reflection. Just the same cycle I'd watched him repeat with his ex, the same refusal to see his contribution to his own chaos. I blocked his number. It wasn't an act of punishment, it was self-preservation. I knew if I let him keep pushing his version of events, my clarity would soften. I'd doubt myself. I'd rationalize. And then the cycle would start again. Blocking him was my line in the sand. I spent the next few days focusing on logistics. I notified my landlord that I'd move out at the end of the month. The apartment felt tainted now. Every room tugged a memory I no longer wanted to sit with. I started browsing listings for studios closer to downtown, somewhere with big windows and enough space for my desk and not much else. Something small, something mine. But the nights were harder. Even though I knew I made the right choice, I still woke up sometimes with that split second of confusion, the kind that comes before your brain fully remembers reality. I'd reach out instinctively to the right side of the bed, only to find the cold, empty space where Benjamin had once slept, the ghost of a habit I no longer wanted. I began running again, something I'd stopped doing because Benjamin hated early mornings. I'd jog through streets still half asleep, watching shopkeepers roll up their metal shutters, streetlights blinking off as the sun took over. My breaths felt like tiny victories, each step a reminder that I was rebuilding myself in real time. Work became an anchor. Routine made sense when emotions didn't. My boss handed me a project I had turned down months earlier because Benjamin hated when I worked late. I accepted it immediately. The long hours kept my mind busy, and solving complex logic problems was like sweeping dust from the corners of my brain. Therapy helped too. I found a counselor who didn't flinch when I confessed the small, shameful truth. I feel stupid for not seeing it sooner. She didn't respond with pity. She said people who love deeply don't see the warning signs as quickly as those who love cautiously. You're not stupid, you're human. It was the permission I didn't know I needed. Slowly the fog lifted. My appetite returned. My laughter didn't feel forced. The weight on my chest eased. The sharp pain of betrayal dulled to something manageable, something that no longer throbbed with every thought. A few weeks later, I found a small studio with a balcony overlooking a busy street. It was loud, narrow, and had absolutely no storage. I loved it instantly. On move-in day, as I set my laptop on the desk and pinned my hair up to keep it from sticking to my neck, I realized something quietly beautiful. There was no trace of Benjamin in this place. No memories, no shadows, no places where he'd said something that still hurt. It was a blank slate, a reset, a home. By the time I unpacked my last box, I realized I hadn't thought about his texting with Chloe in days. Not because it no longer mattered, but because I no longer needed the answer to any question about it. His choices had already told me everything I needed to know. And yet, with some cruel irony, just as I settled into my new life, pieces of his began to unravel. Mutual friends started texting me updates I hadn't asked for. A casual, "Have you heard here?" A quiet, "You were right to leave there." The picture forming was consistent. Benjamin had run straight into the arms of the woman he'd insisted was just talking. And the chaos that followed him was the exact storm I had once unknowingly sheltered him from. The updates came slowly at first, drifting into my life through conversations I didn't initiate but couldn't fully avoid. Mutual friends, the ones who existed in that strange social overlap where choosing sides felt awkward, dropped bits of information like crumbs scattered across a table. It started with one message, pretty sure Benjamin moved in with Chloe. I stared at it longer than I should have. Not because it hurt, it didn't knot in the way they probably assumed, but because I felt an odd, quiet confirmation settle over me. This was the outcome he had been steering toward long before I packed those boxes. I had simply made it official. More messages followed. They're posting things together again. She convinced him to quit that remote contract. I think they're fighting a lot. I never asked for details, but people love reporting chaos, especially when they witness the calm you left behind. From what I pieced together, Benjamin had surrendered himself fully to Chloe's orbit. She had always been the type who lived intensely grand declarations, dramatic swings, impulsive decisions wrapped in poetic justifications. He used to tell me she was the storm, and he was the one who couldn't help walking into it. Back then, I thought it was self-awareness. Now I saw it for what it really was, addiction. Apparently, moving in with her wasn't some romantic reconciliation. It was messy, rushed, impractical, two people clinging to the familiarity of dysfunction. Chloe had convinced him to drop his stable design clients because they were holding back his creativity. She painted visions of some artistic revival they'd share together, a life fueled by passion and spontaneous inspiration. What she didn't mention was that passion didn't pay rent. Within weeks, they were buried in overdue bills. Chloe constantly disappeared for days to play gigs that barely covered the cost of gas, leaving Benjamin alone in an apartment filled with empty bottles, crumpled music sheets, and the fading scent of incense she burned to cleanse bad energy. He started taking on odd freelance jobs, logo redesigns, rushed poster designs, anything but Chloe would guilt him for not investing more time into her creative world. I learned about their fights in pieces. A friend saw them arguing outside a venue. Another overheard Chloe screaming at him in a parking lot. Someone else mentioned Benjamin sleeping on a friend's couch after a particularly vicious blowout. Every story echoed the same pattern he once described to me in tears. The yelling, the emotional whiplash, the dramatic apologies, the passionate reunions, the disappearances, the jealousy games, the accusations, the chaos. It was strange sitting in my studio apartment with sunlight spilling across the hardwood floors, listening to the muffled city noise below and hearing about the meltdown happening in someone else's world. It all felt very far away, like observing a storm from the safety of a warm room. In the meantime, my life was quietly rebuilding itself, not in sweeping cinematic strides, but in small, steady ways, the kind that last, because they're intentional. I had taken on the project at work I'd once refused for Benjamin's sake. The responsibility was intense, the deadlines tight, but I thrived in the structure. My team's respect grew. My manager hinted at a leadership opportunity. I took long walks on weekends, bought plants for my balcony, and started cooking again, not because someone expected it, but because the act of chopping vegetables felt grounding. Evenings were peaceful. I'd sit with my laptop on the couch, working on a side project, an app for freelancers like Benjamin used to be. There was a kind of poetic irony to it, but not in a cruel way. I wasn't designing it out of spite. If anything, I was designing it for the version of Benjamin who once needed stability and didn't know how to create it. It was during one of those late-night design sessions, rain tapping on the glass, my tea cooling beside my keyboard, that the first message arrived through a new email address I didn't recognize. Subject, can we talk? Carol, I know things ended badly, but I need to explain. It wasn't what you think. Can we meet? I closed the email without replying. 2 days later, another message arrived, this time shorter. Please, just once. I messed up. I archived it too. Then came a text from a number not in my contacts. It's me. Can you pick up? I blocked that number as well. His attempts continued, scattered across platforms like desperate signals from someone drowning in a storm he willingly stepped into. Some messages were apologetic, dripping with regret. Others leaned into justification, trying to convince me my boundaries were unreasonable. It wasn't cheating. We were only talking. I didn't leave you. You pushed me out. The internal twisting, the narrative flipping it, was all the same rhythm I once tried to soothe. When I didn't reply, the tone shifted again. You owe me a conversation, at least closure. Closure. The word people use when what they want is a second chance disguised as emotional maturity. I had no intention of giving him either. The attempts didn't come only from him. His best friend Julian messaged me. He's going through hell, at least hear him out, don't be cold. Cold. The word designed to make women doubt their self-preservation. I didn't respond. Then came a message from an unexpected number, his mother's. You treated Benjamin terribly. Packing his things was cruel. You're heartless. I blocked her instantly. The narrative they were creating wasn't mine to correct, and I had no interest in playing the villain in their script. The messages kept coming in waves, some guilt-laced, some frantic, some angry, some remorseful. But I stayed silent. Not to punish him, not to make him suffer, but because I had finally learned how to protect myself. And while all of this happened, the updates about Benjamin and Chloe only grew darker. Chloe had been unfaithful again, this time with someone in her band. When Benjamin confronted her, she mocked him, called him needy, told him he was suffocating her dreams. They fought violently. She threw things. He stormed out. She posted vague emotional rants online about toxic people who pretend to be supportive. Eventually, she kicked him out. He had nowhere to go, no job, no savings, no stability. He had burned through the safety net I had once been and discovered that Chloe's world didn't have one. Somewhere in that chaos, he must have realized that the stability he now craved was the same stability he had once dismissed as boring, suffocating, insecure. By then, I had already moved on enough to not feel satisfaction, only clarity. We weren't living parallel lives anymore. He was spiraling downward, grasping for something steady. I was climbing upward, building a life not out of desperation, but out of choice. And then came the night he appeared at my new apartment door. Not through texts, not through emails, not through guilt fed by mutual friends. He came in person, disheveled, pale, eyes red, shoulders slumped, clothes wrinkled, a ghost of someone I once knew. He knocked once quietly, then again harder, then whispered my name through the door. When I looked through the peephole, my breath caught, not from longing, not from pain, but from the haunting, undeniable truth. Benjamin had finally become the version of himself I spent years trying to save him from. For a moment, I simply stared at him through the peephole, the distorted lens warping his outline into something softer, easier to pity. When I finally opened the door, not wide just enough to make eye contact, he looked up at me as if seeing a lifeline. "Carol, thank God. Can I come in?" His voice was uneven, scraped raw. "No," I said, my tone steady. "You can talk from there." He blinked at the firmness he wasn't expecting. The Benjamin I'd once known relied on emotional gravity, pulling people into his orbit, twisting sincerity into guilt, leaning on vulnerability until the other person bent. For the first time, his pull didn't touch me. He rubbed the back of his neck and exhaled shakily. Everything fell apart. "Chloe. She's not who I thought. She's unstable. She cheated again. Kicked me out. I've been sleeping on a friend's couch. I lost work. He swallowed hard. "I made a mistake. You were the one who grounded me. The only person who didn't give up on me. I see that now." His words came fast, tumbling over each other, shaped by desperation rather than clarity. To someone else, it might have sounded like remorse. I had the unfortunate advantage of knowing him intimately enough to recognize the pattern. This wasn't an apology. It was an escape plan. "Benjamin," I said, keeping my voice even, "you didn't make a mistake. You made a choice, every single step of the way." He shook his head, stepping forward slightly, as if proximity could soften my resolve. "I didn't choose her over you. It wasn't like that. You told me my boundaries were insecurity," I reminded him. "You dismissed me. You left to see her the moment I expressed discomfort. You made your priorities incredibly clear." He winced, but only for a heartbeat. Then came the shift, his breath hitching. Eyes glassy, posture crumbling. I know. Okay, I messed up. But I've changed. I swear I have. I just need a chance. We can fix this, Carol. We were good together." "We were good because I carried the weight," I said quietly. "And you didn't notice until you lost the comfort of it." He stared at me stunned, not because he disagreed, but because he had never expected me to articulate the truth so cleanly. His voice softened, trembling around the edges. "I can be better. I want to be better. With you." I already cut ties with Chloe. I blocked her. I told her I was done. "I'm not your consolation prize," I replied, "and blocking her now doesn't erase the months you chose her emotional chaos over our relationship." The desperation flickered into something sharp. "So that's it? You won't even try to forgive me?" The tone, accusatory, almost offended, was the clearest reminder of why I walked away. "Benjamin," I said gently, "forgiveness isn't the same as going back." He inhaled sharply, shoulders tense. "You're cold. You're acting cold on purpose." "Protecting myself isn't cold." His composure fractured. Anger crept into his posture, stiffening his jaw. "I gave you 3 years. You won't give me 5 minutes." What he meant was, I only value this conversation if it ends with me getting what I want. I didn't step back. I didn't soften. I simply adjusted my grip on the doorknob. "You gave those 3 years to your imagination of yourself," I said. "Not to me." His face twisted. "Wow. You really think you're better than me now, don't you? With your new job and your little apartment and what you think you're untouchable. I think I've finally learned what I deserve." "Unbelievable," he muttered, raking a hand through his hair. "I came here to pour my heart out, and you've already moved on. You probably found someone, didn't you? That's why you're being like this." I didn't flinch. "Yes," I said honestly, "I'm seeing someone." His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Already. You left emotionally long before I packed your boxes." He looked as if I'd physically struck him. His ego reeled not from heartbreak, but from the realization that I had stopped orbiting him. "What's his name?" he demanded, bitterness dripping. "Does he know you're heartless? Does he know you threw someone out like trash?" "His name doesn't matter," I replied. "What matters is I'm building something healthy." He scoffed. "Healthy? Please. You're boring. You always played it safe. That's why He stopped himself, but the sentence was already naked in the air. "That's why I went back to Chloe." He paled, realizing what slipped out. But I wasn't hurt. I was free. There's a strange peace in hearing the truth spoken by the person who once hid it from you. "Good night, Benjamin," I said calmly. As I closed the door, he shoved a hand on the frame. "Carol, please, I need you. I'm falling apart." His voice cracked on the last word. "I hope you get the help you need," I replied, "but it won't come from me." This time when I shut the door, he didn't stop it. He stood outside for several minutes, pacing, muttering, occasionally tapping the door with the side of his fist, not forceful, just restless. Eventually, his footsteps faded down the hall. I knew it wasn't the end. Not for him, not for his attempts, not for the network of people he would enlist to guilt me. And I was right. Over the next few weeks, the messages multiplied. Unknown numbers, DMs from people I barely knew, Benjamin's friends, even acquaintances of Chloe who somehow felt entitled to weigh in. One message, just talk to him, you're being dramatic. Another, he's broken without you. If you cared even a little, you'd help him. Someone else, you act so perfect, but I bet you're worse than her. I blocked every account. In the middle of that storm, something quietly beautiful grew my connection with Ethan Park, a colleague who joined our team a few months earlier. He was steady without being controlling, ambitious without being entitled. We bonded over long coding sessions and shared coffee breaks that gradually stretched into walks after work. He never asked for pieces of me I wasn't ready to give. He just offered presence, patience, and sincerity. The kind of warmth that didn't demand attention, but invited trust. The real turning point came at a mutual friend's birthday party. Neutral territory, dim lights, loud music, people scattered in clusters of laughter and drinks. Ethan and I arrived together. Not flaunting anything, just comfortable in the quiet way two people are when something real is growing. Benjamin was there. He spotted me almost instantly. The recognition hit him like a blow. He walked over shoulders, tense, smile brittle. "Carol, can we talk privately?" he asked, pretending his voice wasn't trembling. "No," I said, "we can talk here." His eyes flicked to Ethan, then back to me. "Please, just a minute." "There's nothing left to say," I replied. He inhaled sharply. "I'm begging you." "You begged me only when you lost the chaos you chose," I said. "That's not love, that's dependency." The room around us quieted, not dramatically, but enough that people sensed the tension. Ethan gently moved closer, not inserted, just present. Benjamin's composure cracked again. "I'm a mess, Carol. You win okay?" "You were right. Chloe ruined everything." "You ruined it long before she did," I corrected softly. His face twisted. "You've replaced me, haven't you?" I didn't answer with words. I simply reached for Ethan's hand. Benjamin saw it, felt it, and something inside him snapped. "You're parading around with some upgrade." "Seriously, I hope he leaves you the same way you left me." Heads turned. People shifted awkwardly. The spectacle was unmistakable. I remained still. "Your choices led you here, not mine." Benjamin stood frozen, breathing unevenly, eyes darting around the room as if he were suddenly aware of every single witness. A friend quietly guided him toward the exit. He resisted, then eventually stumbled out, cursing under his breath. When the door closed behind him, the tension dissolved. People avoided eye contact, unsure whether to comment. I didn't need them to. Ethan squeezed my hand once. No questions, no assumptions, just steady presence. That night sealed the end of a chapter I'd been closing page by page. The last threads unraveled, releasing me completely. By the time I fell asleep in my apartment later, I realized something profound. Not all closures come from conversations. Some come from finally seeing a person as they are, not as who you once hoped they might become. It's strange how quietly a year can pass when you're not dragging the weight of someone else's chaos behind you. One day you're shedding remnants of a life that no longer fits, and the next you're looking back at it like a distant city you once passed through, a place that shaped you but no longer defines you. A year after that night at the party, I finally understood something I'd missed during the thick of it: healing doesn't arrive with fireworks or sudden clarity. It arrives in softer forms, in the way your shoulders loosen when you wake up, in the way you laugh without checking the emotional temperature of the room, in the way your future feels less like survival and more like choice. My life, piece by piece, began to feel like my own again. The project at work became the stepping stone to something bigger. Months after my promotion, my company offered me a lead developer position at a new startup downtown. The kind with glass walls, unlimited coffee, and a creative energy buzzing through every meeting room. I accepted instantly, and the jump opened a door I had once been too afraid or too weighed down to walk through. The pay increase let me move into a loft overlooking the river, exposed brick walls, tall windows, a balcony, where I could sit with my laptop in the evenings and watch the lights ripple across the water. For the first time, I wasn't designing my home around someone else's comfort. Every piece of furniture, every plant, every framed print was mine. I didn't realize how deeply I had needed that until I felt it. Therapy became lighter too. What started as weekly sessions out of necessity gradually shifted to monthly check-ins, My therapist once told me, "You stopped confusing stability with stagnation. That's when people truly grow." She was right. I had spent so long trying to convince someone to choose peace over chaos that I hadn't realized how draining that fight had been. And then there was Ethan. We didn't go from colleagues to partners overnight. It happened gradually, naturally. Our connection grew through shared morning coffees, long late-night debugging session, and conversations that eased me in ways I didn't know I needed. Ethan didn't rush. He never asked me to be anything other than myself. He didn't expect to be my entire world. He just wanted to be someone who added to it. Somewhere along the way, between our road trips, our quiet Sundays reading on opposite ends of the couch, and the soft moments that stitched our days together, I fell in love with him. It wasn't the dizzying, turbulent kind. It was solid-rooted, a steady warmth rather than wildfire. We traveled together, a promise I once made with someone else, but finally fulfilled with someone deserving. Machu Picchu, Bali, the Appalachian Trail. Moments that rewrote memories previously tinged with ache. We created new ones untouched by manipulation or regret. One evening during a road trip along the coast, Ethan pulled over at a cliff overlooking the water. It was near the spot where Benjamin had once taken me on a trip that ended in an argument so intense it left a bruise on my memory. I hadn't told Ethan the details, only that the place was complicated. He took my hand, looked at the horizon, and said, "Let's make this place yours again." Then he brought out a small ring box from the pocket of his jacket. He didn't kneel. He didn't give a rehearsed speech. He just held the ring between us and said, "I want to build a life with you, one built on the kind of peace you taught yourself to choose." I don't remember crying, but my cheeks were wet. We got engaged as the sun dipped below the line between sea and sky, reclaiming a memory that once belonged to pain and rewriting it with something beautiful. Life didn't turn perfect. Perfection isn't real, but it turned whole. Our loft became home to a rescue dog named Bite, hyper-spoiled and convinced he owned every square inch of the place. Work thrived. My app gained traction, attracting freelance designers who praised how intuitive the layout was. They didn't know the irony, but I did. Every now and then, old mutual friends would mention Benjamin, quietly, almost hesitantly, as if saying his name might pull me back into a place I no longer lived in. The stories followed a predictable pattern. He had bounced from job to job, relationship to relationship, always searching for stability in places that didn't have it. He dated a few more women who resembled Chloe in one way or another, creative, unpredictable, emotionally volatile. He hit rock bottom after another brutal breakup, went to therapy for a short stint, then stopped. Tried reaching out to several people he had once called friends, but many didn't respond anymore. The last thing I heard was that he was living with a roommate he barely knew, drifting from gig to gig, still chasing the version of himself he had built on chaos. 6 months ago, he tried reaching out to me one final time from a fake account. The message was short. "Saw your engagement post. Happy for you. We could have had that." I blocked it instantly, not with anger, not with satisfaction, but with a peace that didn't require revisiting the past to validate the present. He had become exactly what he chose, and I had become exactly what I fought to be. The past no longer held my breath. It no longer weighed on my chest at night. It no longer shaped my choices. It simply existed, an old chapter with its lessons underlined, its pages closed. As I sit now on my balcony, watching the lights flicker along the river, Bite curled up at my feet, and Ethan inside, humming to himself as he cooks dinner, I feel something I once thought was unreachable. Not revenge, not triumph, just peace. Peace born from boundaries. Peace earned through clarity. Peace protected by finally choosing myself. To anyone who finds themselves in a story like mine, wondering when the weight will lift, when the chaos will settle, when the healing will begin, know this: the moment you walk away from what breaks